Greetings, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here in the gathering place and many people joining us online. Thank you for coming. We're going to start today's event, the culminating event of Selkirk Reads, with an opening by Donna Wright.
I guess it's good afternoon, everybody. My name's Donna Wright, and I like to consider myself as a part of the old ones, although people call us at this age and stage elders. I like the old ones because it goes with the cycle of life of the child to the youth to the adult to the elder, or old ones. My father gives me Cree and Métis, and my mother gives me Norwegian. And it's an honor to be here today with all of the things that are going on today for my life story and what I have experienced in my life, to witness what is happening today in people's attempts to understand and not bury the truth. It's pretty wonderful. So I want to say that right first off. Second off is that I'm often getting the opportunity to do what I call as an opening. And for generations, our people felt that the prize ceremony, the essence of ceremony, was to hear and to be heard. Everything is based on that. The talking stick, everything is based on being able to hear and being heard. So part of my role I see in this age and stage of life is to create the safety for that to happen. As a grandmother, I want to tell you, all of you, that you are perfect, and that the very fact that you're breathing says you belong. There's nothing else that's going to make you belong more than breathing, and I can attest to that at this age and stage. So I just need to say that first. Second is that you are bringing a very special gift, because each one of us has our own eye print and all of those things that are just ours. There's nobody else like us. So know that you have a very special gift, and when you come, hopefully what happens today nurtures that gift. It's not the intent for you to nurture us. It's for the intent for your gift to be nurtured by what we're doing. It's kind of the reverse of any kind of colonized thinking. So I'd also like to say, too, that, I love the 4 stages of life. When I get to talk with little people, I have a direct line communication. We understand each other really well. And the in-between world, the younger ones and I have a difficult time understanding sometimes, but because they love us, they try to include us in things, so that's a good thing. So that's why I'm included here today. I want to share with you that it's so important what you're doing, and that you're sharing these stories and, having brought them to life yourself by being here. And I want to use the drum to open us up. And a drum is really important, because the very first drum you hear is your mom. And, one of my favorite things I learned was going to a school one time with some 300 kids, and I had my drum, and they said, they wanted me to come and drum, and they said, well, you can start anytime you want. And if anybody knows what it's like with 300 kids in a gymnasium, what the sound is like, hey? And all the energy, like we're talking here, grade 6 to grade 9, I guess it is. Anyway, as soon as I started to beat on my drum, not beat on it because we don't beat, but as soon as I started to do the heartbeat, the whole room just went quiet, and everybody stood around me, and it's because they could feel it. So what I'd like to do right now is to show you, because what we need most in this world is connection. And every opportunity we can get to connect and honor each other for who we are and not what we want you to be, and that we get to share who we are and you share with us, and that makes the world richer without us having to change to meet anybody's needs. So what I'd like to do is just have you close your eyes, and I'm just going to drum the heartbeat just to give you a sense of what this feels like. I do this with little kids. They just love it, and I just want to ask where you feel it. Can you feel it? And where did you feel it? Yeah. How cool is that, hey? So now we're connected. So now what I'd like to do is do a song. I'm not taking too long today because you have a very short time. But I was trying to think, what song will I do right now? And I couldn't. I usually do the heartbeat song, but I feel like I want to do an eagle song. So if anybody wants to drum with me, grab a drum and come on and drum. So, and if you're willing to and able to, if you would stand with me when I drum, I'd be really happy. I'm going to do the Eagle Song because I think what this 92 days is doing is freeing up our hearts and freeing up our spirit. And we believe the eagle flies closest to whatever is out there that we lean on, whatever you choose to call it. Ready? I'm going to do the 4 drum strokes just to acknowledge the directions, because what I like to do is honor all of our nations that are represented here, because we all come from a land, and I want to call in all our ancestors to be with us today. Are you ready? I'm going to do the 4 directions and then drum. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One da ho, 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 ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One da ho, 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 ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. One da ho, 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 ho. One day and a hey and a hey and a ho. Now, what I know to be true is sometimes when drumming happens, you feel emotions, and they're wonderful. Now I'd like you to free up those emotions by remembering what it was like to be in grade 2 or 3, and what do you do when you get out for recess? You gonna join me? Woo! How does that feel? Enjoy your hour.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Donna. My name is Jenny Barron. I work as the chair of the Muir Center for Peace here at Selkirk College. And on behalf of the college, I wanted to acknowledge our sincere gratitude to all the Indigenous peoples on whose traditional territories, unceded land, we live, work, and play. Sinixt, Tanaha, Silk, Shakwebmek, and the many Métis who call this place home as well. We honor your histories and your presence. We thank you for your stewardship, and we commit to walking together with respect to illuminate truth and work towards justice, healing, and reconciliation. I'd like to invite Marta Abel to join me here, who's going to talk about the context of today's event.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for pulling this together. Thank you all for being here. I'm Marta Abel, People and Culture Advisor, and this event is the culminating event of Selkirk Reads, which was a series of book clubs on books related to truth and reconciliation, and part of a framework that we call the 94 Days of Education and Action. So this included multiple learning events, reading circles, there'll be more to come this week to give space for us all to meaningfully move forward together toward reconciliation. And I really appreciate Jenny for pulling this series of book clubs together and this event to give us all space to learn together.
Thanks, Marta. Later at the end, Marta's going to tell you a little bit about some of the other events that will be taking place this week. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Selkirk Reads. It's a college-wide initiative just started this year to promote ongoing learning together in community about themes that are related to truth and reconciliation. the idea was to loosely model this after CBC Radio's Canada Reads, which is, as many of you probably know, an annual event that promotes Canadian authors. So in Canada Reads, 5 prominent Canadians are invited to each champion a book that they feel everyone in Canada should read. And the champions get together each day for a week, and they hear each other out, and each day they vote one book off the proverbial island, and they eventually arrive at one book that's declared the winner. So for Selkirk Reads, we decided we wanted to focus on Indigenous authors writing in this contemporary nation state we call Canada, about themes related to truth and justice and harm and healing, decolonization, Indigenous histories, Indigenous realities, Indigenous resurgence. And we created a long list we put out there to the college community, and along with a request for people to come forward and step up to be book champions. And we had a really wonderful response. 12 people came forward to champion 10 books, or in the case of the children's literature book group, a bundle of books. And each of the champions pitched their book or books in a short video that was shared on social media, and then invited others in the college and the broader community to join them to get the book, to read it, and then come together in a mini book club, like as in one meeting, to discuss the book that they'd read. Selkirk Reads, unlike Canada Reads, though, was not a competition because we decided we wanted to promote all of the books. So today what we're doing is to share with you the books that constituted our short list, and they come from all genres, and we want to hear from the book champions a little bit about why they chose the books, and each champion is also going to read a passage from the book so that we can hear and appreciate the voices of the authors. So I'm going to invite each of the Selkirk Reads champions to come to the podium and introduce yourselves and your books, please.
Thanks again, Jenny. Hi again, I'm Marta. I read 20 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph, and I picked out a couple of passages, short passages, one from a part of the book called The Beginnings, where Bob Joseph details the many harms of the Indian Act. So just to speak to one of them, he says, Indian Act regulations devalue women and are considered the primary cause of the vulnerability of Indigenous women today. The Native Women's Association of Canada states, these systemic issues have directly caused poor health and mental health, economic insecurity, homelessness, lack of justice, addictions, and low educational attainment for Aboriginal women and girls, placing them in precarious situations where the risk for violence is greater. Peggy Blair writes about the rights of Indigenous women on and off reserve. Aboriginal women are more likely to face domestic abuse than other women in Canada. While 1 in 10 women in Canada is abused by her partner, almost 1 in 3 Aboriginal women is abused. If an Aboriginal woman leaves the reserve to escape domestic abuse, she can lose her home. There are long waiting lists for housing on reserve and often a great deal of pressure on band councils to reallocate housing as soon as possible. Many Aboriginal women who wish to live on reserve cannot do so because of a lack of housing. At present, Indian women do not have the same human rights or protection of their rights as Canadian women. And so this is one of the many harms caused by the Indian Act that Bob Joseph writes about. Toward the end of the book, in a chapter titled Looking Forward to a Better Canada, Bob Joseph writes, Canada is changing, and I foresee a future in which the Indian Act will be a chapter in Canada's history. To put it simply, the Indian Act was designed for a specific purpose that no longer exists in a country committed to reconciliation. The focus should now be on dismantling the Indian Act, moving towards self-government in an orderly and timely fashion, and creating a self-governing future for Indigenous peoples outside of the Indian Act. In addition to self-government, other important objectives that Indigenous peoples will pursue in the absence of the Indian Act are a return to self-determination and self-reliance. Self-determination is the right to decide who your people are. Under the Indian Act, there are many rules governing membership, and bands, First Nations, are required to maintain a registry of community members based on those membership rules. Self-determination would allow for both status and non-status members to be part of a self-governing community, which would be driven by the community's own membership code. Self-reliance means getting out of the perpetually underfunded arrangements currently offered by Canada. Indigenous communities need the opportunity to run efficient and self-sustaining communities by collecting their own revenue resource, such as royalties and taxes from development on their lands, as well as collecting property taxes, if so desired. This will allow communities to participate in the economic mainstream. So just a couple passages from different parts of the book to show the present reality and a vision for a future beyond the Indian Act. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Lisa Dean, and I champion this amazing book, Buffalo is the New Buffalo, with my colleague Renee Harper, who is on leave for the semester. There's so many amazing books out there, and we're both fiction writers, so we're thinking, what might we read and study that's a little bit different, perhaps? Just thinking about, there's so much trauma narratives, which are really important, but it's also important to consider something like what Chelsea Vowell did, which was imagining differently so that we can act differently. That was sort of her tagline for the book. And so this is a collection of 8 short stories that do really interesting things, like the very first story, Chelsea Vowell just writes a story in which Western expansion never happened, and just sort of shows how harmonious and amazing that world is. And I'm going to read just a little passage, and read this book. Also, I just learned from Danica that I think School District 8, is that who it is? Yeah, SD8 is going to be doing like a SD8 wide book club, and I think we're participating. There's going to be 20 copies of this book at the library, so if you missed your chance to talk about it this time, you have another chance. And then Chelsea Vowell will be joining the book club via Zoom. You have a chance to listen and learn more. This is a great book because it's great for settlers and also for Indigenous folks. There's footnotes for people like me who don't understand all the Cree words and all the context. And so, I can't say enough about just the genius that is Chelsea Vowell. And I wanted to read a short passage that I had bookmarked. No loss of bookmark. Here it is. Okay. So this is a story that takes place in the context of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, there's this alternate reality where, the authorities in Edmonton are dropping off ration packages. You're not allowed to leave your house. Everyone's like really isolated. It's super dystopian. And so there's this weird VR system out there that's a little shady. Don't really know what the intent is behind it. Bad people trying to capture you inside virtual reality and like download your consciousness. But what this character does is tricks the system and figures out like there's a code where you can get out of VR, but she takes the opportunity while she's in the VR to commune with nature in a really beautiful way. So I'll just read a little bit of that. So this is a character who's in virtual reality and is creating a very deep relationship with a beaver. And one thing that I'll say about the beaver, I want to read one sentence at the end of, there's an afterword after each story to just fill you in on anything you might have missed. And it's this idea of walking away from colonialism and capitalism isn't entirely possible unless we do it en masse, and you don't need to transform into a beaver to do it. And then skip forward, and it says, we can waddle through dark streets and value relationality over possessions. We can transform everything. So here's a little bit of living with beavers. Day after day passed with intense communication between herself and her host as she formed a complex question of her own. Would the beaver allow her to take control of its body? The beaver was intrigued, but proposed a counteroffer. If she would teach it how to be human, it would teach her how to be a beaver. She accepted. It was not easy. Their terms of reference were so different in many ways, but slowly they learned together, at least the physical aspects of being. Social customs, etiquette, history, all of that was beyond them to impart quickly and would still have to be learned. After a while, the beaver lost interest in practicing being human. It thought it was a silly thing to want to be. One night, as they lay in the cozy sleeping den, she sent out a tentative tendril of sympathy to the beaver. It was met with surprise, but the beaver understood. It could not leave this place empty of other beavers, of the possibility of family, but it had never lost hope that one day it would dive into these tranquil waters and discover a new presence. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I want to start just by thanking Jenny for inviting me to take part in this. It was a very powerful experience for so many different reasons, and hopefully that'll come out in today. My name is Kim Verrigan, and I'm the Department of Athletics and Recreation. And the book that we reviewed was written by Fred Sasakamoose, and it was called Call Me Indian. From the trauma of residential school to becoming the NHL's first treaty Indigenous player. And if I'm being totally honest, the hockey part drew me in to start. But I realized almost immediately that there was so much more to the story than just the hockey piece. And Fred actually did play in the NHL, and he played with the Chicago Blackhawks in the early 1950s. And he played with some very significant people like Gordie Howe, Jean Beliveau, and Maurice Richard. But he only played in 12 games, and he managed to create a story and a journey that was so incredibly powerful to so many people, and it was a pleasure to read. So I would strongly encourage picking up this book and giving it a go just to kind of see how you feel about it. And so we had a fairly large group, which was great, and a lot of great discussion. We actually only had an hour to discuss after the book, and I collected some words on what some of the people kind of said on how it impacted them. And you'll see after you hear them, maybe try and visualize a little bit, but there was respect, deep symbolism, family, shocking, disturbing, painful, outrage, anger, horrific, eye-opening, community, honor, perseverance, resilience, and inspiration. And this was all just by reading the book and us talking for an hour. And I have a few comments from people after we talked that were kind of significant. But I chose a couple of passages. One was from the very beginning. It was actually the first page before chapter 1. And it goes like this. As a man long grown, I was told this. On the night I was born, an old woman said I was special. People say she blessed me. She gave me song. She said she saw my future in the stars. No one told me about this old woman when I was a child. I never heard a word of anyone from this. But still I knew that the world had something special in store for me. It was my grandfather, my Musum Alexin, who told me this. Alexin was deaf and mute. But for the first 7 years of my life, he was the one who spoke to me the loudest. He was the one who spoke to me of my future, a future I hope I have lived up to. So after reading that, before even starting the book, there was a lot of people that were like, wow, this could be something really special that I'm about to get myself into. And I chose a passage from the very end of the book. It's actually on the very last page of the last chapter. And the story kind of goes like this, where 50 years later, Fred was invited back to the Chicago Blackhawks organization to do a ceremonial puck drop and a check presentation. And he came back, and there was a lot of fanfare. Everyone was super excited to see him. And as part of it, the Blackhawks organization presented him with this beautiful new jersey with the logo that he wore very proudly so long ago. And the expectation was for Fred to put this jersey on and walk out to center ice and do the puck drop in front of thousands of people in the stands and millions of people on TV. And this was Fred's reaction. I'm going to wear what I have on, I said, but thanks anyway. I'd come to Chicago wearing a fringed buckskin jacket. It was decorated on the shoulders, pockets, and sleeves with blue and yellow beadwork. It reminded me of the one Nahiawak used to wear when I was a boy, like the one my mother made for me and brought to Saskatoon when she watched me play hockey for the very first time. It was a jacket that meant a lot to me. I was going to wear it out to center ice. I wanted everyone watching from the stands and on TV to see it. I had always wanted to come back to Chicago, but now I knew what was really important. It wasn't coming back as a Blackhawk. It was coming back as a proud Cree man. And again, just a very moving piece. And do I have time still? Sorry. I'll just finish with a few comments from what the people in our club sort of had to say. And some of them were very affected by some of Fred's experience, and this is an example. I heard about residential schools. I knew about them, but I never realized the detail that Fred gave, the actual and true impact, or from the detail that he gave. Another person said, I was talking with someone this morning not interested in hockey, and it was regarding the book and how they thought there was a good read, and I was expecting it to focus on the trauma or residential school aspect even more with the hockey bits. Even though it was part of the story, the way it was told, weaved in and out, the other part stood out more. Resilience, drive, healing, community support, and family. Finally, the last comment was, I felt like we could have talked and discussed the book for several more hours. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Maggie. I'm very grateful to live and work with all of you here at Selkirk College. We chose a little bit of a different format with the Selkirk Reads program. We chose to explore children's literature. I'm the mom of a 4-year-old who started kindergarten this year, and always looking for ways to teach him with curiosity. And what our book club continues to be is a caring circle and a sharing circle for sharing different parents and educators ways that we can gather resources that are, age appropriate and culturally appropriate, and sort of we explored some themes, and we'll continue with the book club beyond just this format. So we're really excited to kind of create a community of practice that we invite all of you to continue with as it evolves. One of the themes that came up for us as we explored book titles was the publishers. And so we really wanted to figure out, who puts these books out there, not just who's the author, but who's the artist, but who's the publisher, the publishing house, and where do these proceeds go to for some of these books. In an attempt to, sort of avoid books or publishers that maybe didn't have the best intentions, but were really gravitating to, trends and what people wanted to buy. And so we did a lot of learning on that. Through that, we found this publisher, and I'm going to read you a book. They're called Medicine Whale Publishing, if any of you are familiar with them. Yeah, okay, so they actually publish with Phyllis with the Orange Shirt Society her book, and that's the first place I came across it. I was very grateful to meet Phyllis, and she signed this copy, so it's kind of one that's near and dear. Also in the selection that she has is this book called Gifts from Raven. My son's name's Raven, and so we have a lot of books, a lot of things about ravens, and so this one's also really special. The one that I want to read for you today, I actually chose it sort of last minute because I was sort of feeling it out. We had a book club meeting this morning, and when Donna was talking about the talking stick and sort of just bringing the generations and the children, it really resonated with me, and so I'm going to read this book. It's called The Circle of Caring and Sharing, and it's written and illustrated by Corky Larson Johansson. And there's also Cree, which I'm learning all about, words and languages in here. So I'll start just reading and trying to show you the pictures that you can see. So there once lived 2 foxes who were best friends, and they lived on the plains where the sky never ends. One day these 2 foxes had a terrible fight and were no longer friends when they went home that night. The 2 foxes refused to talk the next day, which made their friends sad and not want to play. An older buffalo knew just what to do. She went to the cook and the owl and said, "Hoo, hoo, hoo. We should hold a sharing circle today so that we can all hear what our friends have to say." So they gathered the animals from all around to come in a circle on the ground. The circle is sacred, the circle's for sharing, and connects the community in a way that is caring. We're gathered today because of a fight to bring all our feelings out into the light. The animals took turns passing the stick to speak. Some gave a loud roar, others a squeak. The fox listened to each other explain that their feelings were hurt and causing them pain. Now that the foxes understood what went wrong, they could go back to getting along. The animals thanked Cookham for bringing them together. They knew they would be friends forever and ever. What's really interesting about this book is, and that my son really resonated with, is at the back, the Plains Cree animals and their phonic pronunciation. So this is his favorite part of the book. So we look at all the pictures. The owl is oohoo, and the skunk is seagawk. And his favorite, the prairie chicken, is asiku. So just really interesting way to introduce asiku, to introduce language to early learners. One additional thing that I wanted to share from our book club is that we expanded to talk about young adults. And I picked up this book. I haven't read it yet, but I've picked it up. It's actually adapted by Monique Gray-Smith, who's coming to, we're hosting as the Truth and Justice Speaker Series later in October. And so if you're familiar with the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, this is an adaptation by Monique Gray-Smith, and it's targeted to young adults, and it has a lot of great questions in it. I've only flipped through it, but I'm actually learning a lot more from reading this version of the book than I maybe did when I read the first version a while ago. So, thank you.
White, Kisikukit, Tanze. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Danica Uyghur. I'm on the Indigenous Services team here at Selkirk. And the book I chose is called Making Love with the Land by Joshua Whitehead. And I chose this book selfishly because Joshua and I are from the same community. I'm a member of Peguis First Nation on my mama's side, and so is Joshua. And I have settler ancestry on my dad's side, and I was raised outside of my culture. And so any opportunity that I can get to learn more about my community and who I am as a band member, and yeah, so selfishly, that's why I chose it. I also chose it because Joshua represents a really important voice in our community as an indigiqueer two-spirit person. And this writing is really yummy and juicy, I guess, is how I would describe it. So I definitely recommend it. I also wanted to thank my dear friend Rodney because there's a lot of language in this book, and we're very lucky here to have a fluent language speaker. And Rodney's very generous with his knowledge, and I have a dialect Cree expert in my pocket when I send him texts at 9 saying, how do you say this in Cree? So thank you, Rodney. So I'm going to read a passage. This is a collection of essays, and this part of this book was written during the pandemic. It's July 2021, and I'm at Princess Island Park in Calgary, Alberta. The Every Child Matters vigil is going on to mark the bodies of the children being found on the sites of residential schools. This ceremony is being held instead of canceling the annual national holiday that is Canada Day. I am weary, for I have witnessed far too many deaths already. I am with a Dene friend, and we have decided that today we will not allow any whiteness in our proximities. We are wearing our orange shirts, the symbol of the missing children, to the park. We walk from Kensington along the river. There's a heat wave in the province, and the sun bears down on us with teeth clamped around our limbs like a res dog in heat. There is no reprieve but for the Bow River. We stop along an inlet, but here we find the water polluted by Canadian nationalists in their grotesque white and red attire. We dip our toes into the cool water, eyes darting from side to side, alert for danger or approach. If our beads and skin are not a dead giveaway, the orange is a homing device upon our bodies. Yet we want this release. We push into the water, we splash our faces with the cool mountain water, and we wade deeper until our pelvic bones release from their rigidity and our bodies are cooled and relaxed. My hair is in a tight braid, one my friend has done for me. It ain't no powwow braid, but it'll do, she noted earlier, bursting into laughter in her tiny apartment. We push our heads and hair into the water, throw it back like a horse's mane, and spark joy in the current of the river body. Our glasses have fallen into the water, and we are blind and blinded by sun and whiteness alike. We find our glasses and continue to the park. We hear the drums, the sound of music, the laughter of aunties as their throats strain from the intensity. When we reach the vigil, we come upon the final song of the day. It's a round dance, and the two of us have not danced, hardly touched, for some 18 months. The drummers thank everyone and ask to round dance this final song if we are comfortable doing it. We succumb, now double vaccinated, but still shying away from the intimacy of touch. We join hands, my Dene friend and I. her hand in mine, moist to the touch, warm and pulsing the rhythm of blood, and we look at one another, eyes flaring like sundogs, yet as gentle as dancing sky. The feel of skin is a foreign invitation and yet familiar, our eyes divine into wells. As we look up together, we see that hundreds of people have joined us, forming 4 circles, intertwining into one another. This is the largest round dance I have ever seen. And now we move to a 5-minute song, the rounds of the drum intensifying our steps, as if a stethoscope is placed upon our chests, matching beats. We look to one another, here at the end of the end, or perhaps a new beginning, and cry. We sob for the children, we sob for touch, we sob for this reunion, not only of those of us here now, but of community. We are outpouring a reservoir of pain that we lapped up, from puddle to alleyway to Great Lake, by which I mean we ate pain from those we loved, we have known and have seen. And here it pours out like a great storm upon the sunniest day. We pound into the ground, barefoot and thrumming, until we ourselves become woodwind, until we ourselves become drum. And again, I see that it is not we who are eating, rather it is we who are feeding. This land upon which we are guests echoes our morsing and says to us, Pematisoin, Pematisoin, Pematisoin. Thanks, Rodney. And when I wake, I wane renewed, and yet here I am, awake still. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Webb, and it's my honor to be here in place of Briar Albano, who is the champion for Richard Van Camp and his collection of short stories titled Moccasin Square Gardens. Briar was unfortunately double booked. Unfortunate for her, fortunate for me. So Richard is a Tilcho Dene author, born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And Briar has a very personal connection to this story, in that when Briar was a university student, she was roommates with one of Richard's younger brothers. And there is a story in here, these are works of fiction, titled The Promise. And if you read The Promise, that is based on a brother-brother interaction. And sure enough, in the afterword, The Promise is dedicated to my brothers Roger, Johnny, and Jamie. And so I really, really wanted to read from The Promise, but it's full of F-bombs, and I didn't think I could pull it off in this setting. So I went with Grandpa Etse, and this one is, Etse Grandpa. I'm going to jump into the center of this story. So it's a man-child, if I can use that term, living in his mom's house. He's really excited to have an afternoon to rewatch E.T. and see if it's as good as it was the first time around. And his grandpa shows up. And now, here we were, together, watching E.T. From time to time, Grandpa would point to the TV, and I could tell he wanted to ask me questions. I did my best to answer using sign language. As happy as I was, I felt that old soul ache of not being fluent in Tilcho. I had about 80 words in me, but I wasn't conversational. Being fluent was my dream. It was always my dream. I was so worried about our language, but I was raised away from the Tilcho, and we never spoke it at home. Grandpa cried when he thought E.T. was going to die. I cried too. We took turns blowing our noses into Kleenex. I kept the movie running so we could each maintain our dignity. At the end, my grandfather was so happy. When the credits came on, he gave me a thumbs up and smiled. Good movie, he said. Good boy, good friend. I almost started crying again. I'm going to jump to when, later on that evening, when the man-child is talking to his mom. How come you showed him a movie about a mushroom who helped a boy? Mom asked me. A mushroom? I said. Yes, she said. She looked very serious. I started laughing. It was E.T. What? She said, why did you show him that movie? Then she started laughing too. Know how to say mushroom in Tilcho? She asked. Deloju. It means squirrel food or frog house. I could have asked why she never taught my sister and me Tilcho, but I didn't. I knew that we had been raised in Smith because of the drinking and violence and chaos in Bechoco. In Smith, we were raised with the Cree, the Chippewan, the French, the Gwich'in, the Inuit, the Slavey, and other friends from across Canada. We had a happy upbringing. We built our own log house as a family. I think that was our proudest achievement. Well, and we partied tamely. We were proud of that too. And the afterword dedicates that one to his Etse, Grandpa, and Etsy, Grandma. And Richard Van Camp is learning Tiltro Dene now, and so I'll share one word, Masi Cho, for gratitude. So Masi Cho to Jenny and the organizers, Masi Cho for all of you for being here, Masi Cho to Briar and whoever double booked her, and Masi Cho to Richard Van Camp. This was very influential for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and the book that I read with my reading group was Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wagesh Rice. I'm just going to talk about it a little bit before I read a brief passage. This 2018 novel brings us to a small Anishinaabe community in Northern Ontario, where the power grid suddenly goes dark on the eve of winter. Cut off from the outside world, there's growing panic and confusion amongst the community members as the food supply starts to dwindle. While the band council and a pocket of community members struggle to maintain order, an unexpected visitor arrives, escaping the crumbling society to the south. Soon, many others follow, bringing chaos and a violent struggle for power to a community of people who've already survived the previous apocalypse of colonization. Whether or not this allegorical tale is perceived through the literary lens of post-apocalyptic fiction, or perhaps even as Indigenous horror, casts some light on the preconceived worldview of the reader themselves. The sudden disruption of oil-dependent modern conveniences doesn't signal a break in the cycle of the so-called progress for the members of the Anishinaabe community in the same ways that it does cause social breakdown through the urban settler communities to the south. The Anishinaabe are a people who were forcibly estranged from many of their ancestral traditions in the past and who continue to work to reconnect with these traditions. This abrupt break in their ability to depend on the conveniences of the petroculture only reinforces that the modern cycle of extraction truly has no more solid or sustainable ground. The novel flips the script of post-apocalyptic fiction and brings a literal process of decolonization to life that makes way for an imagined sustainable Indigenous future. This story has the power to intentionally dislocate us from our cultural blind spots and to reveal the truth of our legacy as settlers so that we might come to reconcile with both of ourselves and all of our relations. It was hard to choose a passage to read. He's such an incredible writer, but I chose this one near the beginning of the book. The power has gone out, but it's still before any chaos has really set in or any outsiders have arrived. And this is a conversation between Evan and his father, Dan, after they've had a successful moose hunt. Outside, Dan had begun to strip the hide of its fur. It was usually the easiest step in the process, and he appeared to be making good progress. The dead leaves on the ground rustled around Evan's feet. About time, Dan said, without looking up. The son took his spot beside his father again. What are you thinking about doing with this one? I don't know, maybe your mom can make something of it. Patricia usually made moccasins and sold them to trading posts and souvenir shops throughout the north. It was good extra money. They stood quietly again. That comfortable, easy, important silence between a father and son fell upon them. Evan pulled out his pack of cigarettes once more, and so did Dan. They took long, soothing drags on their smokes, staring into the hide and occasionally into the forested horizon. Without turning, Dan said, I had a dream last night. Evan's head turned slowly in his father's direction. It was night. It was cold, kind of like this time of year, but it was the springtime. I don't know how I could tell because it was so dark, but I just knew that it was. I was walking through the bush. I remember I had my shotgun over my shoulder. I had a backpack on too. I don't know why or what was in it. His sentences came out slowly, with a precise rhythm. Evan dragged on his cigarette again, transfixed by his father's unusually candid speech. There was this little hill in the distance. I could see it only because it looked like there was something burning on the other side. There was this orange glow. It was pretty weird. It wasn't any place I recognized. Nowhere around here anyways. So I kept walking towards the hill. The light on the other side got brighter.
I knew it was a big fire the closer I got. Evan couldn't remember the last time his father had spoken so much at once. He wasn't known as a storyteller or a talented orator. He never talks about his dreams, Evan thought. Dan continued. As I went up that hill, I started to see the flames. They were so high. The fire roared, kind of like the rapids down the river. It was popping and cracking real loud, and then I got to the top. Evan's face tightened, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. The whole field on the other side of the hill was on fire. I couldn't see anything in that field except fire, but it wasn't spreading. Then I looked around, and I saw a bunch of you guys standing and looking at it. It was you, Cam, Izzy, some of your buddies, and even Terry. There were a bunch more too, but I couldn't tell who they were because they were so far away. You were all spread out, just looking at the fire. Evan inhaled deeply. His cigarette had burned down to the filter between his fingers, singeing the orange paper. Everyone was wearing hunting gear and had their guns in their hands, but no one had any orange on, like right now. And when I looked closer at your face, you looked really skinny. Cam too, and the other guys looked weak. It was pretty weird. Then I understood what was going on. We had put the burn on to try to get some moose in. I can't remember the last time we had to do that around here, but everyone in my dream must have been really hungry. No one was saying anything. I looked over at you. He paused and turned to look at Evan. You looked at me. You looked scared, and that's when I woke up. Dan went silent, and Evan stared at his feet. When he looked back to his father's face, Dan's eyes were locked on the bush in the distance. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chantel Lorty. I'm an instructor in Health and Human Services. And so this is the book that I chose to champion, Seven Fallen Feathers by Tanya Talega, Racism, Death, and Hard Truths in a Northern City. I actually was introduced to this book through CBAL when I joined an Indigenous author book club a few years back. And so when I was given the opportunity to possibly champion a book, thank you very much, I chose this one because it was one of the first Indigenous authored books I'd ever read, and it really made me think about all the inequities Indigenous youth still face to this day within Canada, and especially now as a mother, even more so, rereading this book, it hit very deep for me. So just to read from the back, from 2000 to 2011, 7 Indigenous high school students died in Thunder Bay, Ontario. They were hundreds of kilometers away from their families and forced to leave home because there was no adequate high school. This is still an ongoing issue as well that everyone should be aware of. So there's no adequate high school on their reservations, and the different areas that they live around, more remote places and rural places in Ontario, and as well as other provinces in Canada have the same problem. So 5 were found dead in the rivers surrounding Lake Superior, below a sacred Indigenous site. Using a sweeping narrative focusing on the lives of the students, award-winning investigative journalist Tanya Talega delves into the history of this northern city that has come to manifest Canada's long struggle with human rights violations against Indigenous communities. What I really appreciated about this book was that it was not only about their deaths, but it was also about their lives. And it really focused on who these 7, beautiful young human beings were, and who they were to their families, as well as the tragedy surrounding, the loss of their lives. And I just wanted to read a small passage just from actually the very beginning of the book. And so Tanya wrote, "To understand the stories of the 7 lost students who are the subjects of this book, The 7 Fallen Feathers, you must understand Thunder Bay's past, how the seeds of division, of acrimony and distaste, of a lack of cultural awareness and understanding were planted in those early days, and now how they were watered and nourished with misunderstanding and ambivalence. and you must understand how the Government of Canada has historically underfunded education and the health services for Indigenous children, providing consistently lower levels of support than for non-Indigenous kids, and how it continues to do so to this day. The white face of prosperity built its own society as the red face powerlessly stood and watched. And yeah, that just is very emotional to read that, because I, just truly believe as an educator that all children deserve fair and equitable education. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional. And so I was hoping to use some of my time to just spend 1 minute just in silence to just honor all the children that have been lost and continue to be lost. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chantal. That was a very thoughtful addition to the program. Very fitting. Thank you, all of you, book champions. Sarah, Lisa, Carrie, Kim, Chantal, Danica, Maggie, and we have two others who, Renee Harper and Lisa Gates, who worked with Lisa and Maggie, respectively. And also we had a community member, Jody Bremner, who stepped forward and championed the book Indigenous Rights by Chelsea Vowell. And we also had, Teresa Southam, who championed a book called On Me by Francine Cunningham. And it just worked out beautifully that we had all these different genres represented. We had fiction, we had nonfiction, we had memoir, we had short story, we had poetry. And it wasn't by design, it was just like a potluck. So I want to thank you all again, and also thank the audience, anyone who's watching here. We do hope to make this an annual event, a tradition. So please consider this your invitation to step up and champion a book next year. This really helps us in our commitment as a college, as a post-secondary institution, our commitment to ongoing learning, and of course promoting reading and learning, working towards reconciliation. Thank you, Donna, very much for opening the event. Thank you, Rodney, for your translation help. And Bronwyn, thank you. We put out a table and we invite people for the today and the rest of this week to bring any books that you may have that you've read, you've enjoyed, and you can bear to part with in the interest of sharing them so that other people may read them. And books that are there, you could exchange one and pick up a new one and keep your learning going. So if you haven't yet come into the college, I'm talking with my fellow staff members here, coming into Castlegar anytime this week, come to the gathering place, look for the table in the hall, put your books there, and hopefully take one home. It was mentioned earlier, and I'm going to give another plug for it right now, that we have an event coming up very soon by a speaking event, our annual Truth and Justice speaker series featuring Monique Gray Smith. And this is going to be at the Brilliant Cultural Center on Tuesday, October 10th at 6:30 p.m. Information is on our website. Look for these posters around. And I'm going to hand it over to Marta to tell us about a couple of other events that are coming up and to bring this to a close.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, in addition to the Truth and Justice speaker, there's tomorrow on Castlegar campus, right outside the main entrance, there'll be a flag raising of the Every Child Matters flag. That's at 12 noon. And we hope you can join us and tell your colleagues and students if they can take some time out of their lunch to come and be part of the ceremony. And we've invited an Indigenous elder from Tanaha Nation to come and share her story, and an Indigenous student to share her story as well. The flag will be up for a week. There are also flags being sent to our campuses and learning centers throughout the region, so they'll be up throughout the region along with some context. So we hope you can engage with that in some way. Other events are posted online on our website. They're mostly community events that we've aggregated, and just a sample. This Saturday in Nelson, there's an inaugural race called Movement is Medicine that Danica, who you saw earlier, is participating in. It's a fundraiser and an event to raise awareness of truth and reconciliation and to promote healthy movement. Fried bread, top of the mountain. I think there'll be Indigenous language, like interpretations, like throughout the trail, so you can hike or run that. You can also just show up in Nelson to support those who are hiking and running. So that's just an example of what you can find on our website. There's also film screenings in Nelson and Trail, other events in other communities. So we hope you and your families and your students can help honor this in a meaningful way. And thank you all for being here as part of this inaugural event. And oh yeah, one more thing. Thanks, Jenny. Next week on October 4th, at the Mirror Center from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. there'll be a screening followed by a discussion of a film called Picking Up the Pieces, which is a documentary that follows Carrie Newman, who was a master carver, as he made the witness blanket, which lives in the Canadian Human Rights Museum and has pieces from residential schools throughout Canada. It'll be coming to Nelson in 2024 and through the Nelson Museum Archives and Gallery, and they've offered to partner with any instructors who want to build that into their curriculum. So if you're interested in that, we hope you can come and join a facilitated discussion following the screening. So thanks again, and appreciate all of you for your commitment to truth and reconciliation. I hope you have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.